These are 12 wide receivers you should not be drafting in 2024 redraft fantasy football leagues. We're going to go through guys that we think are currently overvalued at their ADP and will be on more losing rosters rather than winning ones. So I will start us off with none other than the league winner himself from 2023, Puka Nacua. I'm not sure if a player has ever gone from undrafted, in fantasy drafts to an early second rounder in 1 year. I mean, I don't know can you guys think of anyone?
No.
Like, I mean, it's crazy, how,
Not that
I think obviously he deserves to be drafted, pretty highly, but I think this is too high. He was the overall wide receiver 6 last year. So, very, very good. And this year he's being taken as the wide receiver 8. But if you take out the weeks Kupp was injured, like at the beginning of the year, and you just use weeks 5 to 17, he was overall wide receiver 9. And also, even when Kupp was out there playing, Kupp was not 100%. So now he is 100%, and he's going to command even bigger target share. When Kupp was out, Puka was averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game and almost 11 targets. When Kupp was out there, he was only averaging 15.4 fantasy points per game and 8.5 targets a game. So I mean, we can't forget who Cooper Kupp is. Like what he just did a few seasons ago. He is still a very talented receiver, and he's healthy this year. So I just think in the early second round, you're going to be able to find other clear wide receiver ones in their offense, or even like a stud running back in that early second round. Puka is just someone that I think you should be avoiding in 2024.
Yep.
Corey, I have a question. Or not a question, more of a statement. I did say draft him last year. We'll throw it out there, but we'll move on.
And then you didn't do it yourself.
I did
draft
dynasty team.
A couple, but
all right. Well, we're gonna head to the stinky city of Pittsburgh and talk about George Pickens. All right. Right now, he's going as wide receiver 28, around pick 57. So, offseason started great for Mr. George Pickens, lost his target share competition and Deontay Johnson to the Panthers. A couple new quarterbacks coming to town, and it was all systems are go until Arthur Smith arrived. The fantasy nightmare offensive coordinator or head coach for the Falcons last year. To put this into perspective, Arthur Smith had an amazing talent in Drake London last year who had under 1,000 yards and 2 touchdowns. The guy loves running the ball and playing his backups. He's the most unpredictable coach out there calling plays. And it's just a complete disaster here for Mr. George Pickens. So aside from the fact that he has Russell Wilson throwing him ducks left and right, at his position of 28th receiver, he's probably going to see some regression last year from his 11-yard, 5-touchdown season. So we feel like there's a lot of great picks behind him that probably have some more upside. So that'll be our second wide receiver to avoid.
All right. Coming in at number 3 here, Davante Adams. This is a kind of polarizing pick. I've been off the train for about a couple years now since he got moved on from Aaron Rodgers and moved to Vegas, with a terrible, terrible situation. Well, that situation has not gotten any better. He's 31 years old now, which is usually the time we start seeing receivers regress. Now, I know Davante Adams is kind of an outlier. He's one of the best route runners still in the NFL at the age of 31, but who's throwing the ball? Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. I will say Gardner Minshew, he did lead my Colts to, a pretty good year, but, Minshew last year with the Colts, his air yards per attempt was 7.3 and his true completion percentage was 69. Both ranked outside the top 20 among all quarterbacks last season. So yes, Davante Adams is going to get the vast majority of the targets in Vegas, but it's just not going to be enough. I mean, if you're getting 12 targets a game and you're catching 8 of them and an average of, 7 yards, like that's 56 yards. Like, and now we got touchdowns on there, and we just don't think this offense is going to be very good. So with him being the wide receiver 11 taken off the board in the 3rd round, I think that is way too high for him. I think he's being drafted at his ceiling. I think he's just not what he used to be with Aaron Rodgers. And the fact that the Raiders did add Brock Bowers with 1st round draft capital he's going to take away from his target share. Jacoby Myers is still there. Jacoby Myers had a pretty good season as well last year, so it's just way too high for Davante Adams. If he was going in like the 4th or 5th, I'd be all over him. But 3rd, I think it's just way too high. There's too much other value there that we again deem better than Davante Adams.
All right. Our 4th guy here, wide receivers to avoid, is Jordan Addison. His ADP is in like the middle of the 8th round, going as wide receiver 42 right now. Jordan Addison had a very solid rookie campaign, 70 catches, 900 yards, 10 touchdowns. Really, really solid year. But if you don't put that into context, then the numbers look better than they actually were. Justin Jefferson was out 7 of those games, which obviously means if he's healthy, there's going to be a reduction in targets, yards, touchdowns, etc. for Addison. And even with that stat line, rookie year, he was 53rd in wide receiver efficiency and 47th in yards per catch. So putting up numbers, but not really doing a whole lot with them. Also, obviously, there's an injury scare there. He avoided anything major, according to the coach, but that suspension is still looming, and he could be suspended by the league or the team. And then on top of that, you throw in Sam Darnold as his quarterback. And Nick pointed this out to us either on the live stream or right before, but Sam Darnold has one of the worst out of active QBs completion percentage and was it air yards, Nick?
Yeah, he ranked 44th out of 46 QBs in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
In completion percentage, and it's not looking great for him.
Yeah. So Addison's definitely a dicey bet in the 8th round, where you're still looking at some solid value, and he very well could put up some decent numbers, but I just don't see his path there with Sam Darnold and all these kind of off-field and injury kind of tags on him.
Some may say to swerve around him.
Yikes.
All right. Next, we have Jayden Reed. He is going as the wide receiver 35 off the board in the 7th round, around there. He's also the first Packer taken, as Romeo Doubs, Watson, Wicks, they all go later than him. So it's just, I don't want to buy in to the most expensive player in drafts when I don't think there's a clear wide receiver 1 in the offense. Watson has shown insane flashes of upside. With Aaron Rodgers, and just the way he scores touchdowns is crazy. Who knows if that'll continue? But still, he's shown he's very talented. Some people think that Dontavian Wicks is the most talented wide receiver in the room. And then you also have all these reports talking about how Romeo Doubs is like his number 1 guy. So he finished as the wide receiver 26 last year, but again, that's with Watson being hurt and before the emergence of Wicks. So there's just other guys in this range that I'd way rather have. You got guys like Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Deontay Johnson. I would take all of those guys who have a much more clear role in their offense than Jayden Reed. I mean, Jayden Reed, yeah, he's going to have big games, but I'm not going to buy the most expensive receiver in the Packers offense when I think it's very muddled right now. So I'm out on Jayden Reed in 2024.
Yeah. A lot of target competition there. We're going to head over to Baltimore now. Another AFC North wide receiver, Zay Flowers, going as wide receiver 27. Posted a pretty solid rookie campaign, most of which was out without Mark Andrews. He's obviously back this year, and the few games they did play together last year, it was very obvious that Zay Flowers just wasn't reaching the same level of production without him. To put it into some numbers here, he averaged 13 points per game without Andrews, and when they played together, he only put up 8 points a game, 8.2 points a game. So there's going to be a significant dip this year. I think you see guys like Isaiah Likely starting to also gain some of that new hybrid slot receiver role. So that's going to take some more target share. And Zay Flowers didn't project well against the target share that he had, and didn't really have a lot of production with that. So I think he's going to have a tough time finding the end zone a lot with Lamar. Now they have Derrick Henry, who's going to be an absolute bruiser in the red zone. And then you obviously have Mark Andrews in the air with Isaiah Likely. So it's going to be really hard for him to accumulate some touchdowns outside of the yards that he's probably not going to be able to pick up. So at wide receiver 27, you have guys like Tank Dell right behind him. So there's a lot more upside elsewhere. So.
Yeah, totally agree with that one as well. Coming with the hot stuff here today, boys. For my second one off the board here is going to be Tyler Lockett, wide receiver 47th, going in the 9th round. And again, sticking with the theme I had earlier today, 31 years old, in an offense that is, very well is the third option there. DK Metcalf seems like the alpha. They got JSN coming back in his second year, fully healthy, new OC, Tyler Lockett. He just isn't the same guy that he was. I think it was like 2018 when he broke out and was like a wide receiver 5 finish that year. To give you an idea, he finished as the wide receiver 33 last year with and 43rd in fantasy points per game. And that was with JSN being injured with some of those games. Last year, he was the wide receiver 33 taken off the board and finished as the wide receiver 51. So the fact is that, I know he's going, 14 picks past his ADP that he was last year. But again, a year older, healthy JSN. Like I don't see where he excels in this offense. He was talked about being traded in the offseason. They wanted to move on from him. They couldn't. They couldn't get the value for him. So I think he's past his prime. And it's not like he had like zero opportunities last year. He was in the top 24 in routes run with 550 and had a very decent 22.3 target share and 1,322 air yards. So like he was getting the opportunities last year. He just wasn't converting anything. So I just think that, in terms of where he is in his career, he's more of a guy that like when you're drafting at this position, like you're wanting to fill your bench players with guys that have, upside. I just don't think there's any upside here with Tyler Lockett, with someone who was, averaging, with his target share, being wide receiver 60 in fantasy points per target. So at 1.6, it's like he's just not accumulating yards down the field. He's not getting as many touchdowns as he once was. So like, again, where he's being drafted, there's a lot more value around him or even behind him. So just move on from Lockett and save yourself some headaches.
All right. Another kind of mangled vet, we'll call him Brandon Cooks. ADP's in the middle of the 12th, going as wide receiver 55 right now. Brandon Cooks had a pretty solid second half of the season. After that bye week, he kind of turned it on, but he was absolutely absent the first month and a half of the season. His yards and points per game have decreased every single year the last 4 years. Did have 11 touchdowns last year, but 8 of those came inside of the end zone, which is an anomaly for any player, let alone one of his size. And it was actually his only season with 10 plus red zone targets. So pretty outlier there. And again, like Corey was saying, this is the type of round, this is the type of range where you're filling out your bench guys. You're looking for very high upside guys. And I just don't think Brandon Cooks at age 31 delivers that anymore. I'd rather be getting younger talent in this range that, we either hasn't completely proven themselves, but has that ceiling, or, anyone that's younger than 31 years old. And, you can argue the CD contract. I'd be willing to bet anything that he's on the field week 1 and it's all sorted out. Then you also have guys like Jalen Tolbert and Jake Ferguson, who I think will get more targets than Brandon Cooks by the end of the year. So he's just a guy I'm not rostering in best ball or season long on any team.
Agreed there. All right. Next, we have Nico Collins going as the wide receiver 14 off the board in the early 3rd round. You could easily make the argument that he is the wide receiver 3 in the offense. You could make the argument anyway. You could say it's wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Tank Dell was Stroud's favorite target while Dell was healthy. They trade for Stephon Diggs, who has been an elite talent throughout his career. So I know Nico is going to have his blow up games, but again, just like with the Packers and taking the most expensive Packer in Jaden Reed in their offense, I don't know why I would take Nico when I can get Diggs or Dell later. And I think they have just as good of a chance to be the best wide receiver in that offense as does Nico. So you can get other guys that in that same range where Nico goes that, again, are clear wide receiver 1s or wide receiver 2s in their offense. Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk. They're all, like, I would much rather have any of those guys than Nico Collins or Jalen Waddle, another one. So I'd be in on Nico if he was taken later, but I just can't justify an early round pick when we don't know who's going to emerge from this offense. He finished as the wide receiver 17 last year, and that's with Dell missing a bunch of time. Now he's being drafted as the wide receiver 14 when Dell is healthy again. They trade for Diggs. I just think he's being drafted at his ceiling or even higher than his ceiling, and I doubt he pays off his ADP.
Yeah, that's going to be tough for him. All right, so headed down to Jacksonville, we have Christian Kirk as our next wide receiver to avoid. Aside from the fact that he is a QB who puts up the same numbers as Danny Dimes, Christian Kirk has a lot more target competition this year. Jacksonville's gotten rid of Calvin Ridley and has added a rookie standout in camp in Brian Thomas and our favorite big play Gabe Davis. So, people are saying Christian Kirk, he's still wide receiver 1. You need to believe in him. Let's just take a look at some statistics here, okay? If you're drafting a wide receiver 1, at minimum, you should expect 7 targets a game, okay? Pretty much industry standard for wide receiver 1. Christian Kirk played 13 games last year because he couldn't finish the season for some injury reasons. You want to know how many games that he was able to exceed 7 targets a game? 2.
How many?
2 of the 13 games. Okay, those aren't wide receiver volume numbers. We know fantasy football is skill and opportunity. He's not doing much with his opportunity. So he has more target competition this year. He already wasn't getting it done last year. He didn't pay out for his ADP. So just a quick look at the numbers here. He's an easy one to avoid. So Christian Kirk, thank you for your time.
Those are some hard-hitting numbers right there. I didn't know they were that bad.
Yeah.
Hey, that's why.
And like, there's no upside either. Like the games that he did put in a lot of target shares, He only has 2 games over 15 points here. Shaheed had double that. Okay. And he's going like 50 receivers later. So if you're just going for the home run hitter, go elsewhere.
All right. Well, I will wrap up my my last wide receiver here with another Packer, and that is Romeo Dubes, aka Dubes. Yeah, he is the wide receiver 55 off the board. Let's see if I can finish this whole snippet without stumbling over my words. Going in the 10th round. Again, I mean, PB nailed it right on the head. I mean, who is the wide receiver 1 in that locker room? I mean, there's 5 guys. You know, you add Luke Musgrave into. I know he's not a receiver, but you throw him into the mix as well. Like, he's fighting for target share as well. You know, finishes the wide receiver 46 last year, averaging 10.3 points a game. Again, where he goes in his the draft position, like in the 10th round, you're trying to fill out positions on your bench that are going to give you upside. Okay, he's not consistently finishing with 10 points a game. Like that's his average over the year, and like with the target share there, he had 17.1% target share last season, which was in line with Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. But again, Christian Watson was also hurt for the majority last year. Then you had Wicks come on late last year as well. Like, I don't understand how anyone in that room can really pay off their ADP besides Watson because of his playmaker ability. And the fact is that the Packers, they rotate the receivers. They don't have like 1, 2, and 3. They play all 5 of these guys. So like you have to take that into consideration as well. Dubes was targeted on 18.9% of the routes run, which was 60th in the league last year. He averaged 1.3 yards per route run. That's 64th in the league last year. I mean, he benefited from Watson being hurt. That's the only reason. So if Watson is healthy and we think Wicks, you know, takes a bigger step, you know, this from what he did last year, like, or finishing off where he started last year, like, I don't understand why taking him there with the theme of this video is like with guys around him or around later or half around later, like that have way more upside than what he does. So just avoid the entire Packers room unless his name is Christian Watson. So facts.
Definitely one of the scariest wide receiver rooms it feels like you want a piece of it, but it's going to be tough to
There's almost like too much talent there.
Yeah.
You know?
That's why it's probably they're better in a format like best ball, where there's going to be some spike weeks from some of them here and there. But in redraft, like you're trying to have a starter every week, and you just don't know who's it going to be on the Packers. So,
right. All right. Finishing us out here, DeAndre Hopkins, another vet. ADP's in the early 8th, going as wide receiver 41 right now. Obviously has that injury in camp that there's still no specific timetable on. The coaches are being kind of, I won't say shifty, but they're just not letting them, you know, they said 4 to 6 weeks, and then Brian Callahan gets asked and he's like, yeah, I mean, we'll see where he's at when we get there. So a guy who could miss the front part of the season, at least a couple of games for sure. Doesn't need surgery, but is 32 years old. And last year was the first year in the past 3 that he's played a full season. Obviously won't happen again this season. On top of that, the Titans added a lot to their pass catching room and in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd. So on top of him missing a couple of games, a lot of added target competition. And let's be honest. So Calvin Ridley's being drafted above him now. Do we really believe that Will Levis is going to be able to support 2 top 40 wide receivers in season-long fantasy? Because I sure don't. And with D-Hop missing a couple of games at least, and being 32, it seems like a very dicey play. I know he's fallen a little bit after the injury, but I think you can go elsewhere in this range and get guys who you know are going to play from the get-go.
All right. That will do it for our 12 wide receivers to avoid. Please comment below wide receivers that you think people should avoid this year in fantasy. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out our 12 wide receivers to target in 2024 fantasy football.